I love those dear hearts and gentle people.
Volunteer work is a major global institution with millions of participants, and there are plenty of organizations responsible for allocating people's labor and generosity where it needs to go. But there are some ideas in philosophy and science that appear to question, unsuccessfully I might add, the value of volunteer work. This video will be a brief exploration of why many of us still or should give and assist people in our volunteer positions, despite the psychological or genetic factors that might hold us back. Let's get the worst out of the way first.
Ayn Rand. How is she still a thing?
Objectivism is a system of philosophy founded by Russian-American writer Ayn Rand, who introduced it in her novels The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Since the 50s, objectivism has grown into a major movement with considerable influence on economic and political networks, for better and worse. The unregulated laissez-faire capitalism advocated by objectivists has produced flourishing industry and immense wealth for some, but often at the expense of workers' rights or the efficiency of infrastructure. Look at Victoria's trains or the US's shocking healthcare. Such attitudes have also led to cataclysmic market crashes like in 2008. But setting aside its results, the core tenet of objectivism asserts that the pursuit of one's own rational self-interest is the highest or only moral act. Sounds okay so far. Objectivism is an ideal of egoism, claiming that we are personally obligated to seek out the full extent of happiness and success available to us. This surely resonates with most people watching this. It is completely reasonable for us to try to be happy and healthy in life. But another major element of objectivism is its total rejection of altruism. In Craig Biddle's thorough overview for the objective standard, he describes objectivism as the act of rationally pursuing one's life-promoting values, neither sacrificing oneself to others nor sacrificing others to oneself. Where objectivism once seemed empowering, this is where it gets disgusting. Objectivism derides altruism, the practice of selflessly helping others, as the morality of self-sacrifice, in which people compromise their own interests to serve another's. Biddle frames altruism as sacrificing a greater value, oneself, for a lesser value, another person, and that such assistance can only harm one's own life and happiness. An ideal objectivist society would renounce all welfare, minimum wage, unions, or industry regulation, and Biddle considers the notion that we are our brother's keepers as sacrificially serving strangers. This terrifyingly self-centered image reminds me of Max Barry's novel Jennifer Government, which is about a future Earth controlled by giant megacorporations, and where the government has been reined in to the point of powerlessness. Objectivism seems infused with an overwhelming scorn for altruism, let alone volunteer work, and which I take issue with on two major levels. I resent the notion that altruists and volunteers give their labor and charity for nothing. In the case of mandated volunteer work, this is abundantly untrue. It is flawed and cynical to assume that you're sacrificing a greater value, yourself, to a lesser value, another person, in acts of altruism or volunteering. Besides, the opposite is true in volunteering. You are devoting yourself to society, something much greater than yourself, and in doing so helping everybody, including yourself, to improve their personal conditions. Of course, this talk of altruism in the context of volunteer work is more complicated when the government is involved, but that's for another video. Volunteer workers are hardly sacrificing themselves or using their efforts for no gain, as Rand and Biddle seem to think. By receiving valuable experience, references to support future careers, and indirectly continued welfare payments, mandated volunteer workers under Work for the Dull get a pass from objectivism, but I still find objectivism to be a belief of gross callousness. I hate the notion that giving requires some kind of compensation for the giver, as if giving or pitching in for others out of duty or the goodness of your heart is an illegitimate way to live. I hate the cynicism in the idea that devoting yourself to others is a form of self-sacrifice, or that fellow humans don't have the right to assistance when they need it. I am glad that charity and volunteer work continue in earnest, flying in the face of Rand's objectivism. Now onto an ideal I like. Well, I say ideal, more of a truth.
There is grandeur in this view of life, as one evolution, the greatest show on earth.
Written by evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins and published in 1976, The Selfish Gene advances the gene-centered view of evolution, which regards living organisms as the vessels for genes to survive and spread. Evolution has long been defined as survival of the fittest, and Dawkins's gene-centered model shows genes as compelled, figuratively speaking, to ensure their host's survival, compete with other hosts, and spread as much as possible, hence the title of selfish gene. This natural selfishness may sound like biological vindication for objectivism, but you'll be happy to read that altruism is completely consistent with the gene-centered model. Organisms tend to help fellows that are more closely related to them. For instance, you are likely closer to your siblings than your cousins. This makes sense from a gene perspective, as closer relatives are more likely to share your genes. Therefore, it is often prudent for a gene's host to assist another host. Even if the first host is disadvantaged or perishes in its act of benevolence, his shared genes still live on and have a better chance of reproducing in the second host. But don't think altruism should be limited to relatives. In his foreword to the 30th anniversary edition, Dawkins declares, "Be warned that if you wish, as I do, to build a society in which individuals cooperate generously and unselfishly toward a common good, you can expect little help from biological nature. Let us try to teach generosity and altruism, because we are born selfish." As with genes and nature, it makes sense for people to perform acts of community assistance, charity, and selflessness to preserve in others the common humanity we share. This also implies to culture, as seeing that other people share common culture and values, or plights, makes us more inclined to reach out to them. I have nothing but love for science and philosophy, love for their capacity to illuminate and inspire, but you'd be forgiven for thinking them to be a little cold at times. Objectivism is a harsh, unsympathetic ideology that I hold endless contempt for, but Dawkins's selfish gene model is a fascinating view on life that, despite appearances, entirely accommodates the existence of altruism, and therefore wholeheartedly allows for volunteer work. I've done my best to refute objectivism in its disdain for charity and volunteer work, but the selfish gene model turns out to support volunteering all along, which is heartening to know. Cheers.